Shrek is one of the most beloved anti-fairy tale movies that a lot of us can relate to and enjoy watching. It is also a movie that has recently come under fire on social media. Within the last week, the question, is the movie Shrek a cautionary tale, has been a question that a lot of people are answering in their own way. Within the last week, the movie Shrek has been accused of being a cautionary tale due to potential misogynistic and patriarchal messaging hidden in the movie. And with all the debate this question has sparked on social media, I'm left with a couple of questions. Is this a valid question? Do any of these points being made in these questions have any merit and can be proven within the movie? And most importantly, is analyzing the movie Shrek and the way it's being analyzed a product of what I'm calling hyperfeminism? I'll be getting into these questions and more in this episode. So, with that being said, is Shrek a cautionary tale? Okay, no, but can we talk about this one, y'all? Hey y'all, it's your girl Cindy Noir, and welcome back to another episode of my show, The Cindy Noir Show. This will be a shorter episode of mine because I'm kind of on a time crunch, but I did want to address this topic and the concerns I have surrounding this topic. So without further ado, let's go ahead and hop into it. Oh, and before you ask, I am crocheting the bottom part of a purse. Y'all already know about the products that are on this desk. And yeah, let's go ahead and hop into today's topic, shall we? Well, there appears to be trouble in the swamp paradise. Within the last week, TikTok has been set ablaze from this one question: is Shrek a cautionary tale? This question was posed by creator Amber Aquila in her own video. Take a listen.
I just posted on my Instagram story about how Shrek is not a fairy tale. It's a cautionary tale, an example of how a woman cannot turn an ogre into a man, but he can make an ogre out of you. Because she started as a princess, she had generational wealth, she could have had a pet dragon. And because she was stuck up there, no hobbies, no friends, the first person she meets is this moody ass stubborn ogre that basically negs her. She takes that as a sign to get him to like her, and she falls in love with him. He manages to get a princess to settle for him, an antisocial outcast, lives in a swamp. Isn't he also unemployed? She's thinking, oh my god, I got the loser to love me.
This question has set social media ablaze, with many people coming to the defense of Amber, saying that not only is Shrek a cautionary tale, but it is clear that Shrek also had some internalized ogre hatred, if you will, and also hated Fiona as an ogre and seemed to only prefer her when she was a human princess. On the flip side, there are many others coming to the defense of Shrek, saying that Miss Amber, respectfully, you're not going to make an ass out of Shrek, no donkey. Their argument is that this accusation has no real backing given the actual plot of the movie, even going as far as to questioning how could Shrek make an ogre out of Fiona when she already was one. Is Shrek a cautionary tale has everyone talking, and if I'm being honest, it now has me talking too. So here's my thing. As someone who has done the work to unlearn a lot of patriarchal ideologies and messaging, I too have the experience of going back and looking at older media and assessing and looking at it through an unlearned patriarchal lens, if you will. For instance, watching Sex and the City as an adult who has done the unpacking and the unlearning work of patriarchal conditioning is riveting. There are often times where I'll see episodes and I'll think, oh, this is not it, you know? So I know what it's like to look at older media and be able to sift through and critique the ideologies that are problematic. With that being said though, I don't think that Shrek is one of those movies. In fact, I find her video and all the subsequent videos to be a reach. And if I'm being frank, kind of concerning. In her video, Amber says that Shrek is a cautionary tale that a woman cannot turn an ogre into a man, but he can make an ogre out of you. That phrase really bothers me simply off the fact that Fiona was an ogre before she even met that man. Hell, the main reason why she was even up in that tower was because she turned into an ogre every night. Shrek was the first ogre that she saw outside of herself. Beyond that though, the way that Fiona was going to be able to break her curse was through true love's kiss, in which she would then turn into her most truest form. So for her to kiss Shrek and become an ogre herself means that despite her being cursed to be an ogre, that was her truest self. If her truest self was to be a human princess, even if she kissed Shrek, she would have remained a human princess. So this idea that Shrek is the reason why she's an ogre, I'm not buying it, and it ain't for sale, respectfully. The whole idea that Shrek was grumpy and unhappy, yeah, because humans made him mad. People treated him terribly. He was terrorized even on his own property. It was humans who terrorized, bullied, and ridiculed him. It was humans that dumped all the fairy tale animals off in his swamp. And it was humans, aka Lord Farquaad, who chastised him and offered him the bet of, if you go get my princess or my queen, then I'll free up your swamp. So when he goes and sees Fiona as a human princess, yes, he is going to apply the same hesitation that he does with other humans onto her. Quite frankly, it wasn't until he got to see her true self, it wasn't until he got to see that she was more down to earth and wasn't as judgmental of him as others were, that he loosened up, lightened up, and became very sweet and very kind to her. But I'm not going to fault Shrek for having his guard up with humans when humans are the ones giving him the most issues. Then she's talking about Shrek being an unemployed bum. Baby, Shrek owns his own house and has land. Now, no, we don't see what he does in the show, so maybe he doesn't have a job. But how can you have a job whenever you leave your house, you're being terrorized? I'm not trying to cap for him being unemployed. I'm just saying, are we looking at the full picture here? Keep in mind, despite him not having a quote-unquote job, man's literally has land and his own house. There are plenty of men out here with a job and no house and no land. So I don't know about that one, stink-a-dink. Then she goes on to say that Fiona had generational wealth and could have been in a castle had she not been with Shrek. You mean the same castle of her parents, the ones who locked her away in that tower with that dragon to begin with? Those parents? You mean a castle with Prince Charming, aka Mama's boy, who the fairy godmother would have been in the bed with them more times than not? Come on. You mean Lord Farquaad? Lord Farquaad. The one who didn't even really want her because of who she was, but because of her status. Because of how good she would make him look. That man did not want her for her true, authentic self. He just wanted status. Where's the happiness in that? Where is the being seen and feeling valued in that? I don't see it because it's not there. And that's an issue that I have with this angle of she could have had material things. And she even said in the video that like women don't value material things enough. On one hand, while I do think we could stand to value material things more, I fear that you're trying to value that over Fiona being seen as a person. Farquaad was not viewing Fiona as a person, but as an object to obtain a certain status and appearance for him. That's really better because he has money and a castle? I don't know. Not to mention, the moment that Lord Farquaad saw Fiona as an ogre, he wanted her locked away. So it's clear that Farquaad did not want Fiona for who she really was. It's clear that Lord Farquaad did not want Fiona for the person she was. He wanted her for the object that he wanted for her to be in his life and his goals and his plans. How was that better than being with someone who let her fart, burp, fight, kick niggas' ass? How is that any better? I don't get that. The angle that Amber's taking in her video really comes across to me as if she's telling women to not value emotional fulfillment and being seen as a person, and to really only value financial stability. And I don't think that that is as feminist of a take as it should be. It doesn't feel right to me. That actually makes me feel very uneasy, and it kind of, I don't know, I'm gonna get into it later, but it doesn't sit well in my spirit to be suggesting that a woman should be prioritizing money and status and appearance over what brings her emotional fulfillment and what makes her feel seen and what allows her, or who allows her, to be her most authentic self. I'm not the biggest fan of that. Why can't we have both? I don't know. Now, don't get me wrong. I do think there are some cautionary tales in the movie Shrek. For instance, don't lock your child away in a tower somewhere all because that child has imperfections that you too have, Sir Father, aka Mr. Ribbit. You turn into a frog at night every night. And you saw your child turn into an ogre, and you thought the best case scenario was to put your child away in a tower with a dragon who would eat her alive if she dare try to escape. That's a cautionary tale for shit sure. Another cautionary tale. Don't always go for who looks good or who sounds good. Go for who helps you to embrace your most authentic self. That's a cautionary tale as well. Because there are plenty of women who went for that man that had the money, had the house, had the status, and they're miserable. Because they got with a man who saw her as an object for his own goals. Sure, she has all the money she needs. That closet is full of clothes. She has all the material. She's quite literally a material girl. But she is unfulfilled. She is lonely. She is unhappy. Because she's with somebody who sees her as an apparatus to his own success. And not as an actual person. So, none of the other possible suitors for Fiona were people who would have allowed Fiona to be Fiona. They were people who were after their own goals and just saw Fiona as a means to an end. I think the most important cautionary tale, though, is waiting for someone, aka a man, to save you will cause you to waste your time and miss out on so much of your life you cannot get back. That should have been the cautionary tale that Miss Amber Girl referenced, quite frankly. Had the angle been, this should have been a movie about women not waiting around for no man and saving ourselves, I would have been sacked for that opinion. Because yeah, now I haven't seen Shrek 4, but apparently in that plot, we get to see Fiona save herself. And even in saving herself, she still meets Shrek and falls in love with him. So aside from that, we get to see in Shrek 4, well, y'all did because I didn't see it. Y'all get to see that Fiona did save herself and she was still willing and able to fall in love with Shrek. Because I can see her angle of Fiona being locked away in a tower, no friends, no hobbies, no life, meant that the first person to come around and do a somewhat decent thing, she was trying to force him into a box that didn't feel right to her. And I think that there are oftentimes women who do the same thing. We don't go out. We don't have our own lives. We don't have hobbies. We hardly make friends. And then the moment that a guy comes along who is somewhat decent, we're trying to force him into the box of being a life partner when he may not fit in that box naturally. Or he may fit in the box, but it has to happen naturally. And you trying to force it isn't making it happen any faster and could also ruin it. All in all, the movie Shrek came out in 2001 during an era where patriarchal conditioning was at an all-time high. And for it to come out and serve as an anti-fairy tale movie at that time, I think that it hit and went against a lot of social norms for what was happening around that time. I found Shrek to be a very progressive movie, quite frankly, because up until that point, every princess ended up with the prince. Every princess was dainty and petite and barely moved, barely talked, but was very much seen and not heard. And here comes Fiona with a mouth, who's willing to fight for herself, who doesn't take no shit, who ends up being a plus size ogre. You know, to me, there was a lot of imagery in there that went against the status quo that deserves its own recognition and merit. And I think that trying to look at the movie Shrek through 2026 lenses is kind of unnecessary. I think that Shrek served the purpose it was meant to serve when it came out during the time it came out. It was meant to go against the grain. It was meant to show a different kind of happily ever after that was against the social norms of what it meant to be a Disney princess. And it was also to show that happily ever afters aren't meant for just white folks. I personally feel like Shrek is about niggas, but that's just me. Happy Black History Month. But I feel like there are some undertones of race in this movie. And I love that her truest form was someone who did not look like the status quo. Her truest form was plus size and green. That was completely unheard of in the era that the movie came out. And I think that it's okay to Honor that. Honor what it was meant to be in that time frame and let it just be that. Which brings me to the bigger issue that I want to address, which is that this video and a lot of the other videos in support of seeing Shrek as a cautionary tale highlight this behavior that I'm seeing on social media that I am coining the phrase around, which is hyper-feminism, likened to hyper-independence. Like I said before, I have done the work of decentering men, of unlearning patriarchal conditioning, and it is a process. There are phases you have to go through to get to a point of having men decentered, and it's not an overnight process by any means. And part of that process is watching content creator women like Amber who are addressing and assessing the ways that patriarchy is fed to us through media. That is a necessary step in unlearning patriarchy. You need to be able to take off the rose-colored glasses that you've been conditioned to have when it comes to how you look at the world as a woman. That is part of the process. So I'm not criticizing that by any means. I'm also not saying that there's anything inherently wrong with being a feminist. Now, while I personally don't subscribe to being referred to as that, and to be feminist or to be a feminist does not have an automatic negative connotation to me. So there isn't an issue with that. The issue for me comes in the process of getting stuck in one of the phases of decentering men and unlearning patriarchy. And it is when you become stuck in either creating or consuming this kind of media or content creation that is dissecting and talking about the patriarchy and men and unlearning it ad nauseum. When I first started on TikTok, a lot of my content was about anti-men. It was about weaponizing competence. It was every other video I was stitching yet another husband, another boyfriend being a shitty partner and talking about it. And that was 95% of my content. And it got to a point where my FYP was curated to feed me content for me to make my content off of, which meant that day in and day out, I am watching video after video after video of men being terrible partners. And it really began to mess with my psyche. It began to make me extremely bitter, extremely jaded, extremely distrusting, and extremely fearful of living in general. When you are watching consistent content of how dangerous men can be and how hurtful they can be, it takes a toll on you as a person. And so I made the choice in my own life to not only switch gears in the content that I watched, but also switch gears in the content that I make. So if you notice over the last few years, my content has moved away from talking about how shitty men are to encouraging women on our own journey of self-discovery. Because I found way more fulfillment in addressing and talking to women about how to view ourselves and how to empower ourselves than I found fulfillment in talking about how terrible men are. So I'm saying that to say that a lot of women who are awakening and going through this process of unlearning are following a lot of these women creators where all they talk about are how terrible men are. And while yes, at the beginning, it is important to consume that kind of media to get your bearings straight, once those bearings are straight, baby, find something else to watch. I'm telling you. Now, this is not me saying that this content should be on par or viewed as dangerous as red pill content. By no means am I saying that. As concerned as I'm kind of growing to be with this kind of content, it is nowhere near as dangerous and problematic as red pill content for the simple fact that this content is not producing women in droves who are becoming violent towards men. Just off of that stance alone, this content is nowhere near as concerning or dangerous as red pill content. The reason, though, why I do find it concerning is because a lot of women who are consuming this content are heterosexual women who only want to date and be with men. And my thing is, this is not me saying to have a false sense of hope. It is not me saying to abandon what you're listening to and enter the Lulu land and think that all men are great. I'm not saying that at all. Here's what I am saying, though. A lot of the women that y'all follow who talk about how much they hate men, but they're married to one or they have one, What they're not telling you is that at somewhere within them, they have to hold space for their partner, for their male partner. What they're not telling you is they have to learn how to maintain and develop a balance between hating men as a social construct and a hating patriarchy, and holding space, holding softness, holding vulnerability for their male partner. You have to be able to do both. And what I found was that the more that I consumed that kind of content, the harder it was for me to fathom holding space for any man in my life who was even worth space being held for. And that is my concern. If you desire to have a male partner, it is not just enough to focus on and consume content that talks all about what you don't want in a partner. You owe it to yourself, first and foremost, to watch content and learn about what you do want in a partner. Yes, it is important to be aware of behaviors to look out for. Yes, it is important to study up on and become aware of various manipulation tactics. Yes. But you also need to learn green flags. You also need to be aware of signs to look out for that somebody is worth keeping and holding on to, because what you don't want to happen is you don't want to become so consumed by what you don't want that if and when you come across somebody you do want, you don't know what to do with them. You don't know how to handle that. You don't know how to allow for a good thing to be a good thing, because all that you have consumed are things going wrong. The other issue I have with this content is the hyper focusing on how terrible men are makes it really easy for women to not have to talk about or look at our own behaviors. And we owe it to ourselves to look at our behaviors too, because the reality is we're not perfect either. Now, I'm not saying we're as bad as them, because we're not, but we have issues too. We have fear of vulnerability too. We are also emotionally unavailable. But when men are topic of discussion, their issues will always sound louder and look bigger than ours. So it's easier for us to look at our issues as not a big deal. But what happens if you come across a guy who is emotionally available and you aren't? Because I'm here to tell you, as somebody who's doing the work to become emotionally available, dealing with somebody who's emotionally unavailable, I don't have much patience for that. I don't have much patience to deal with somebody who is emotionally guarded and not willing to become emotionally available with me. No, ma'am. And so that is why I'm saying it's one thing to have false hope. I'm not asking you to do that. But what I am asking you to do is work toward holding space, holding a little piece of you that if and when you come across somebody who is worth that little piece, you know how to be vulnerable. You know how to let them in. You know how to communicate. You know how to connect with that person for things to bloom and grow. Just like there isn't anything wrong with being independent, but hyper independence can bite you in the ass, it's the same thing. There is nothing wrong with being a feminist and following feminist ideals, but when you get to a point of what I'm calling hyperfeminism, where you're constantly watching content of men being terrible people and terrible partners, when all you can think about is what you don't want in a male partner, if that's who you desire, please understand that there is a risk of you setting yourself up in the end. Not to mention, what do you gain in the long run of only focusing on who you don't want in a partner? My therapist is teaching me that words are powerful, and what we focus on is information to our brains. Our brains don't understand no. Our brains don't understand not. So if you say, I don't want a man who's emotionally unavailable, your brain just hears man emotionally unavailable. So instead, it is more powerful to say, I want a man who is emotionally available to me, and repeat those things and begin to shift what you look at, what you read, what you listen to reflect what you do want. Now, this isn't the end all be all fix. This does not mean that a quick mental shift means voila, here's a great man. But this is just me saying, long term, what kind of mindset do you want to have? I am someone who wants to have a balance. I want a healthy balance of my head being on swivel, of me being aware of how harmful men can be, while also holding space for the fact that I may one day have a son. And I want to be able to love and raise my son in a way that is not punishing him for being a man and being a boy. This is me saying that while I am queer, I am open to being with men, so there is a chance that I may have a husband one day. And I have to maintain and hold space for that idea, because I would hate to have someone who is worth being my spouse in my face and I can't love and care for them because I have been consumed with content telling me that no man's worth it, ever, by women who are married. I'm just saying. I think that there has to be a balance, not to mention the more that you consume that content, the more bleak life feels, the harder it is for you to be happy for others who are happy in their partnerships, the more that you're looking for things that may not actually exist, aka this SHREK theory and analysis. I feel like this analysis is a product of hyperfeminism or an oversaturation of this kind of content. I'm gonna put it to you this way. When you stare at one object for a very long time, what happens to your eyes when you look away from that object and focus on a different object? You often will see the imprint of that first object on the new object. I think what is happening now with women is a very similar thing. When you spend so much of your time focusing on the kind of man you don't want, watching content about the kind of men that you don't want, what happens when you shift your focus to a happily partnered couple? You are still seeing the imprints of the kind of guy that you don't want to be with. So you're looking for that in this happy couple. What happens when you shift your focal point to a man who is a decent guy, who is a good guy? You still have the imprints of what it means to be a shitty guy in your vision, line of vision. So you're looking for that in this new person. And I don't want to do that. I'm learning to do my best to give people that I meet who are new a chance to show me who they are before I assume who they are off rip. I am unlearning my hyper awareness, hyper vigilance of bump if it walked like a duck. Baby, if you have what I think is web feet, if you breathe in a way that might give a quack, if I see one feather, bitch, you're a duck. I'm to that point. And there have been times where I have mess things up because I'm looking and accusing you of being somebody that you haven't even been to me yet, because I'm projecting past experiences onto somebody brand spanking new. Now, while there have been times where that's protected me in the past, I find that where I am in my life now, it is doing more harm than good. So this is just me saying from personal experience. You want to get to a point where you are able to, like I said, keep your head on swivel and be aware of the dangers of men. But if you desire a man, if you want kids, also hold space for the reality that there may be a man in your personal space. And how safe will you be for them if you have held no space for the potential of their existence in your life? I am all for women helping to make other women aware of the behaviors of men. I just think that after a while, sis, you have to figure out and go on your own journey of finding a balance. Whatever that balance is for you, I think it is important for you to know when to come up for air. It is important for you to know when to just enjoy things. A great example of what I'm talking about. This past Saturday, Valentine's Day, Fantasia's husband re-proposed to her after 11 years of marriage. It was a very sweet video. He cried, she cried, they both crowed, and he proposed to her with an 11-carat new ring, 1 carat for each year of marriage. Honey, he went all out, okay? Very, very sweet video. I got a little misty-eyed watching it because it was just very sweet, and I love seeing Fantasia's life and where it's coming and all that jazz. But you go in the comments, and there are women saying that it was performative and that he interrupted her concert to talk about and make it about himself. That's selfish. I mean, there are women in the comments who are turning a very sweet moment into something that it shouldn't be. There are women in the comments saying that what he's doing is manipulative because he's doing it in front of people, that's pressuring her to be okay with it. And this is where I would place the term hyperfeminism because, for one, they're already married. Been married for 11 years. She has said more than once she is very happy with that man. So it's not like this is his first time proposing and that he is trying to use crowd engagement to force her to say yes. They already married. Trying to align this with abusive behavior to me is crazy because they're already married, babes. That's already her husband. He don't need public opinion to sway her into saying yes. She's been saying yes the last 11 years. When your awareness of patriarchy and male behavior gets to a point where you can't even be happy for folks who are happy in their own relationships, I fear we've gone a little bit too far. I'm just saying. When it's to the point that despite that couple making it very clear they're happy, you're still looking for some kind of negative, you're still looking for some kind of issue, we've strayed too far from the plot, people. Another example of hyperfeminism to me is women who get on social media and say they don't congratulate their women friends for getting pregnant. That is the most bare minimum thing you can do. That is just, there isn't anything accomplishing about that. So on and so forth. Like, God damn. God forbid a bitch want to celebrate the miracle of life. I'm just saying. A happily married, a happily partnered couple announces their pregnancy and you in the corner talking about, I say congratulations for what? Do you not... Where's the happiness, babes? Where is the wish? Where are the well wishes? What is going on? I fear that some of y'all are going a little too far with it. How are you helping your community with this kind of mindset? So in conclusion, my issue is not feminism. I am all for women fighting for equality. I am all for us fighting for our rights. My issue is this hyper-feminism rhetoric that I'm seeing on social media that I see creating really negative and jaded women that I think needs to be talked about. When your awareness of male behavior stops you from being happy for women who are with men and happily so, it's time for some evaluation. It is time for an FYP reset, okay? It is time for you to really begin to assess, where are you? Are you okay? Do you need to go see that lady? I just think that when we're to the point that we are looking for the negative in the positive, we're straying respectfully, because whether you want to believe it or not every couple is hiding unhappiness. Not every couple out there is performing for social media but hiding the truth behind the scenes. That's not every couple. And I think that if you desire partnership, if you want to be with somebody, if you want to go somewhere, then you better wake up and pay attention and begin to figure out what you do want and begin to focus more on what you do want than what you don't. Because all that focusing on what you don't want does is reinforce what you already know. You already know what you don't want. Now let's figure out what you do, so that if and when what you do want comes around, you can recognize it. Because I'm here to tell you, being really well versed on what you don't want does not equip you with the knowledge you need to know what you do want. It does not equip you with the correct lens to be able to see what you do want. Because the reality is, the person you don't want and the person you do want do not look the same. They don't act the same and they don't move the same. And you fixating on the behaviors of what you don't want is just perfecting a skill you've already obtained. It is time for you to learn some new skills. And my boy SHREK was not a cautionary tale. Fiona is happy in that swamp with that man, taking mud baths and farting all up in the mud. They are happy with their kids. They are content. Now, while I only saw the first and second SHREK, Fiona never was hurting financially. She never wanted for anything. She seemed real content with that man. So why can't we just be happy for what they had and their own happily ever after? Why does their happily ever after have to mirror all the other prior happily ever afters when the point was to be an anti-fairy tale movie? You know what? I rest my case. With that being said, I hope you all enjoyed this quick episode. And now I want to hear from you. Do you think SHREK is a cautionary tale? Why or why not? And what are your thoughts on what I'm calling hyperfeminism? Am I reaching? Is it a real thing? Are you too concerned like I am? Put all your thoughts in the comments and let me know. And because this episode is kind of a short one, look out for the episode coming from me later on this week. But until then, y'all be blessed and bless up. Bye.